On the first Saturday of December last year, protesters swarmed the building of my newsroom, the ABC in Melbourne, and they were held back by a cordon of police who were guarding the door as they chanted "liars" and "tell the truth" to the journalists who were trapped inside. Now, this was the culmination of months of anti-lockdown, anti-vaccine protests in our city. Some of those protesters had legitimate grievances, but others were convinced that COVID was a hoax, that it was no more severe than flu, that masks were unsafe, that vaccines were unsafe, and that hydrochloroquine or ivermectin were cheap and effective cures. And all were united in their belief that we in the media were actively covering up these truths. How we responded to misinformation and how we prevented it from taking root in the first place was the subject of so many conversations in our newsroom in the past 2 years. Those early months of the pandemic were a crash course in science literacy, as we debated flattening curves and reproduction numbers and case fatality rates and epidemiological modelling. How well we conveyed this science to our audience, and we were grappling with it ourselves, would have a direct impact on how far the virus would spread and the damage it would do. Unfortunately, once false or misleading beliefs take hold, they are extremely difficult to correct. In the words of the economist John Kenneth Galbraith, faced with the choice of changing one's mind or proving there's no need to do so, almost everyone gets busy on the proof. We do know that fact-checking has some positive impact in correcting misinformation, although it is more difficult in highly polarised situations, which the pandemic undoubtedly was. We also know fact-checks are most effective when they offer an alternative causal explanation for the false information and when we reduce the partisan and ideological cues in the way that we report science. And as journalists, we have to get the science right in the first place, even when it is evolving at lightning speed. That means we need to explain scientific uncertainty. We need to explain the limitations of research, the boundaries between what we know and what we don't know, so that when that scientific advice changes, and it did on masks and airborne transmission and the blood clotting risks of AZ, for example, the audience can see it for what it is, which is the self-correcting nature of science at work. And despite that minority who protested against us, I think we can take heart that the pandemic also saw record audiences for in-depth explanatory science journalism, that public broadcasters like the ABC remain highly trusted, and that in a time of crisis, people sought out these trusted sources of news and information like never before.